Let's go ahead and bring up our last two panelists, Zave Greene and Luke Anderson. I'm so excited to introduce you to these panelists. They are the co-founders of an AI company called CorridorIQ. Part of what has happened is they are now being asked to help large organizations across disciplines to also implement AI within their organizations. I'm going to start with probably the question on everybody's minds. What made you decide that we can have a big idea and just build it?
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you so much for including us, and it's a pleasure for us to be here. For all of you who don't know me, my name is Zave, and it's pretty funny because now I'll be in meetings and they're like, so is that like your AI name or is that your real name? So having a unique name has definitely served me. We're so excited and grateful to be here. I'm again reminded that the human connection interaction is so important, and it's just a different type of fulfillment that I don't think technology necessarily can ever provide, but can amplify. And yeah, I mean, going back to, I guess, November it was when we started CorridorIQ, it was kind of a perfect storm. Luke ended up coming to UVA. I'm going to be a senior. Luke just finished his
first year.
And you know, there was no like one moment. I think we both had a lot of little mini aha moments ourselves. And Luke would have come over to my apartment at least once or twice a week. And our conversations naturally, week over week, started to converge more and more on like how we were using AI, what we were seeing. We both had, were reading a lot and have been early adopters, and we kept sharing these moments like, can you believe I did this past week, and vice versa. And I think we both were realizing that the upper bound, like we kept reaching for it, but there was something higher, and it was pretty exciting. I don't know what.
Yeah, you nailed it. I think the way we thought about it was, could we try this? Yes or no? Both involve or converge to you must try. So it's been a hypothesis of ours that we could, if we can keep shattering our glass ceilings, and we're just chugging along every day. So.
And you decided to undertake starting an AI enterprise in an academic environment, which we would think would be extremely AI forward and encouraging. However, the environment in which you were attending school as students was a little different than that, right?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I think higher education as a whole is like you could have a whole panel about an industry that's ripe to change, I think, hopefully in a good way. I'm in the business school, so everyone uses AI, and it's interesting because it was a real mix where there's certainly a taboo where you have some professors who kind of villainize it and label it as you use AI, that's bad, you're cheating, and then everyone's using a tool but hiding they're all using it. And then you're literally like, in my negotiations class at one point, you'd be negotiating with ChatGPT because you could tell it was crazy. Versus I had some professors, one specifically, who said, listen, we're going to do this class and everyone here better use AI, and we're going to, I'm going to encourage you and force you to use it. I'm going to hold everyone to a higher bar, and I'm going to grade you on your human presentation skills, the story, the narrative. And he shared in his 30 years of being a professor, it was the most robust presentations he's ever seen. Students were running machine learning. Students were making 3D renderings. It was pretty remarkable. And everyone was sharing with each other, kind of like today, like, hey, look what I did. And it was the first time I'd had that experience. I know that in the engineering school, it's definitely a mix.
Yeah, it's a mix because a lot of the courses are, can you do 200 math problems in a semester? I'd say it definitely, you get checked because if you use AI for all of your math problems or STEM problems or use it for CAD, and you have to go and then talk about or walk someone through your answer or just go take an in-person test, it's very obvious who was using AI improperly to not compound their judgment over time in that way. But I'd say overall, in the engineering school, people are actually quite receptive. Because it's a little bit harder to bypass the critical thinking because you're tested on it so regularly. But it's still a mix in the whole school. Yeah.
Luke authored a post on LinkedIn, the thesis of which is AI actually makes you think better if you use it properly. And I know it was a long post, but if you could do your best to just succinctly describe that, and I would encourage everybody to read it. It was one of the most thoughtful essays on AI that I think I have ever read.
First of all, that's very kind.
He's got a ghostwriter. He didn't tell you that part.
The thesis is that AI is it's an amplification of yourself. If you have very messy thinking, it's going to give you very messy thinking back. If you're a lazier person, it's going to allow you to be more lazy. But it goes the other way. If you're a very ambitious person, if you really enjoy learning, it allows you to exponentially increase all of your good tendencies as well. That's sort of the central thesis. The extrapolation of that was mainly that we ought to always be learning, and we ought to learn how to learn. I think that's the skill that is in high demand, and it always will be, but especially now, learning to compound your learnings over time is a skill we all ought to just keep making sure we make better.
Thank you, Luke, for sharing that. Again, I'm just going to go straight to the jugular here because Anthropic CEO just made a very interesting prediction that the first one-person billion-dollar company could arrive this year. We're talking about a solopreneur or two entrepreneurs building an AI company that could have a valuation of $1 billion. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think there's the underlying, like the AI as a whole is a platform shift that I don't think we've fully experienced, where it sounds a little dystopian, but intelligence is being sold as a commodity to an extent, and is that it's not human intelligence at all. Sam Altman at OpenAI, for all his quirks, recently described AI as like a form of a utility, similar to almost like electricity, where in the future it's probably something that everyone has access to, and you pay for this utility of intelligence in the form of tokens. I think it's actually not a matter of if, it's when, and I think it totally could be this year. And we've started to see, we've set up some systems internally at CorridorIQ that have compounded in ways that we didn't quite imagine, whereas as AI gets more expensive for the best models in the world, we can actually start using cheaper ones and getting better results because we have built our startup, every piece of it, to be queryable and accessible by AI agents. So for example, every meeting we do since the beginning, the genesis, is transcribed and put in a structured database built for AI. And those meetings were all a product of us being in the world, taking action and sitting down and having conversation. But all of a sudden, like the compression of time and labor is dramatic, because we may be in a meeting, and we may actually be doing an interesting test of this today, where we will go from an hour-long, hard thought-out human strategy session and clashing heads, and then you're done and you have agents working on engineering tickets, working on marketing materials, where I feel like it has brought us higher up the abstraction ladder. So I can 100% understand and see that happening.
And I think Zave touched on a really good nuance, is like, you can never neglect the human layer, the parts that AI cannot replicate, which would be things like trust, things like judgment and taste. Those remain exclusive to the human layer of a company. And I think also whether that ought to be done with one person in the company versus having a few who can all leverage AI the same way that one person could is also something I would not challenge, but nuance that question with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For those of us that are visual, and you can imagine a traditional org chart of a corporation, okay? Can you, in very layman terms, describe how you thought of that, architected that? I know that's hard, but I walked into their apartment and it was like a scene from, what was that movie?
Beautiful Number.
Yes. And it looks like the wallpaper of the inner workings of a human mind, the level of intricacy that is needed to define these layers of agents and how they're all interworking. So try to explain that maybe in visual terms.
That's a great question. One thing that we do every single Sunday that we did from the beginning is we get a giant whiteboard, and we have our own framework that was inspired by Jim Collins. BE 2.0 is a book that we've read a couple times, and we define which is largely unchanging, but broadly speaking, a North Star of where we're trying to go. What are we really working on over the next 1 to 3 months? And then how do we break that down into goals and tasks for the week? Because we're like, well, how are we going to manage our school schedules and truly like build a business? And it started out as a casual habit, I guess you could say, every Sunday, and it was hard. And this is still our rule today, no tech, no AI. Like, this is where we will have a civil conversation about priorities. But we just draw it out like a map, pretty much, of hierarchy. And every one of those then gets a photo taken, and we hand it to our Claude coding agents who have our repository, and it's stored week over week over week. The AI starts to help us work towards those goals around the clock. And then in terms of the organizational structure of how CorridorIQ is built with our agents, I mean, it's the best way I could describe it is if you imagine that whiteboard as like a guiding North Star, and then that's up here, then Zave and Luke as here as kind of these nodes, if you will. And then instead of further delegation, then like our job is to put things in motion. So we will point any given agent or fleet of agents, and what that means is literally just me opening a Claude Code session and saying, let's work on this. I mean, people like to make it very abstract. I don't have a formal computer science background. And then we will point them, and we will probably each manage or watch anywhere from 2 to 4 serious work streams in parallel throughout the day, and spend our time saying wrong, right, or steering.
Yeah, I think it was touched on in a previous panel here. It's like you need to be the visionary to the AI. It's your job to have like the most clear end state. The clearer the end state, the AI now is smart enough. It can figure out like how to do it.
Especially if you know why,
Exactly.
Truly why, which is the hard part.
It's a derivative of the whiteboarding sessions, and what we do every Sunday, and it's hard. Like you have to write it all down, argue a little bit, and clarify what that end state actually looks like.
And there's one thing I'll add that we urge ourselves to try to get as much. We take, especially earlier on, meetings with everyone and anyone we could. And we said, do you mind if I record this? And we'd put the voice memos into this box, a database. So as this is all happening, our agents, everything they do, they reference the transcript. So they go back and they remember the utterances of what was said and the nuance. And we will even explain, we'll try to track the decisions. Like track that, like it's like an OODA loop. Track the loop and the decision and the outcome, event, action, response, whatever you want to call it. And that has also been stacked in our database, which has been really powerful. And we've had a couple aha moments that were pretty dramatic.
Yeah, do you want to tell about the breakfast or dinner example with compounding?
Yeah, well, like the email example?
Yes.
Yeah, so we were in a meeting the other week, and we were demoing our product, which is more of an AI deployment product to build like a second brain at the company or personal level. And we were showing how it worked, and we were kind of testing it ourselves. And I opened my phone, which is connected to, if my computer is open, one of my coding agents. And I just said, hey, send Luke an email about all the conversations we've been having. And this morning we talked, and I had this new idea about this wedge of the market. And literally 10 seconds later, I sent him an email, and it was crazy because it had pulled many, like different transcripts, different outcomes, where it basically said, hey, Luke, I know we've been talking a ton about helping legacy businesses, especially that are still founder-led, because their leaders are probably more hands-on and willing to help lead the AI adoption. Because your mentor, Dwight, 2 weeks ago said that the success of any new change management program is probably going to be a derivative of how willing that firm is to be hands-on and be. Long story short, it pulled all these different pieces of context where we were both like, Holy crap.
Yes.
What I think people are probably finding very inspiring, the reason I brought up the org chart example is many of us have inherited a certain way of thinking about how a business is structured, and to try and reinvent it through AI, we have some cumbersome residue of how we learned org charts are. Do you feel like when you come in and are deploying AI in these other corporations, do you feel like you're speaking a different language?
I think sometimes, yeah. I think a lot of times it's simpler than it's actually simpler than it may seem. Like it just
People like us are overcomplicating it.
like we just here's an example. AI can make mistakes sometimes, especially all the time, but so do people. And one thing that we do with like all of our agents, that someone asked us about this, they're like, well, it messed up the time zone. How am I going to run this automation? It's not going to run properly. And one thing that to us was just a natural way to fix it was like, tell the agent, write a little file just like you had a notebook with your learnings, and anytime before you start, you read what I taught you. So it's a simple principle where you think of it as, we like to use the analogy of, it's like a PhD level intern who can do tremendous work really fast, or really bad work really fast and be way overly confident about it. And you have to give it the instructions and environment and context, which is a fancy way of just saying information, to set it up for success.
Yeah, like onboarding AI is not like getting a new like tool or software. It's not like getting a new SharePoint or Word or anything. It's a lot closer to like onboarding a human being onto your team. You have to give it context. You have to give it information about the business. What is the end state? And exactly right. It's like a PhD level, super intelligent intern who needs to know what is the purpose of your business.
Yeah, who doesn't understand the system they operate in, just their task at hand. So it is a weird kind of mix, but when you frame it that way, you're like, okay, I am the orchestration layer. I have to just steer this very powerful tool that it's not Microsoft Word. It's a form of intelligence, not human intelligence, but a powerful one for sure.
So, Luke, you were a first year, Zave, you were a third year in the business school, in a business school that isn't like 100% AI, right? And this is the Wild West of AI right now. How did you guys learn to do this?
For me, I must have been a sophomore in high school when the first ChatGPT came out. I remember I used it to help me write an essay on the Tempest from Shakespeare, and it was horrible. It would mess up all the quotes, and then I've been using it since then, and I think just constantly grappling with the tool, kind of progressing alongside it was super helpful. I think the huge step change came this winter, which we can totally talk about, but I think just learning kind of alongside the tool gave me a pretty unique perspective on how to use it and how to leverage it properly. So it's kind of been a tool I've been using for a little while, but it's also changing every day, and people could still, even if you knew nothing about AI yesterday, could jump in and learn what's at the frontier right now, which is really important.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think I completely agree with what Luke said, and I would just treat it like my personal tutor that I could ask any question to. For me, like I think early on when we were starting the company especially, I was like, well, everyone's going to ask me like, well, you didn't study computer science and now you're writing software. One, I haven't yet been asked that. Two, if I did, I could answer, because as we would be coding late into the night, and more than anything, just use the tool as much as you can, but be intentional. And this is an example of what worked for me. I'm a visual learner. I can't read, now I'm a little better, but when I used to see a Python script or lines of TypeScript or Java, I was like, this is a foreign language. So I would work to write a plan with the AI in natural language, visually. I'd say, make me like a flow chart so I can understand. And then I'd get to the point where I'd be like, yes, that's what I want, and here's why. And then every time, for a while, for a couple months, as we did these sessions, as a deliverable, it would give me the code, and it would also make me an HTML PowerPoint and teach me it. So I'd say, make me a PowerPoint in HTML, because it's easy to do. You know, I like to learn visually, and teach me the logic behind it. And I'd get my notebook out, and as it was implementing and testing the code, and it would open the web page, and I would have a presentation, take notes on it.
I would add, like, you can let it retrofit to you as a person. Zave is a visual learner. Sometimes I do read the textbook, but maybe that's a me thing. But you can mold the tool to work for you. And
the podcast is pretty interesting.
The podcast is a good one. Something we will be telling people all the time is, like, just go and ask Claude. You can ask Claude, and it will help you. And it may seem weird or kind of like cheating at first to ask Claude to maybe help itself help you, but that'd be a good first step if you ever find yourself in that.
And then talk to people and ask questions when there's the time to do it. That's something that I think is easy to stray away from, and where I see in the higher education space and folks our age, maybe I think this is a non-AI shift that maybe unfortunately being leveraged up by it, is just to go sit down with people and ask them questions. We've been surprised by how many people are willing to, and maybe we have the student card still, where we're like, hey, we're students, but it's been quite humbling, and I've learned so much just by sitting down with people in their respective domain and saying, hey, look, we've got a vision, here's what we're doing, would you mind sharing what you've learned? And that's been pretty powerful as well too, I think, in combination.
What amount of your ability to keep pushing the technology forward and forward to the point where you're now talking to investors, and I'll talk about that in a second, is just this willingness to say, okay, we got to think bigger?
It's a skill, yes. But that's something that maybe going back to education should be taught in schools. Yeah. Learn to think big. Yeah. And those are the intangibles that AI will never do for you. So that would be my.
Yeah, I think for challenging each other, we would actually start to carve out time during the week to call the other one out and be like, I don't think you're thinking big enough. Part of that came from trying to do some really audacious things and almost being frightened that it worked. Honestly, seriously, I remember the first time we were doing some of this data analysis, and we were like, I don't know how this is going to go, but it's going. And then through talking to other people who are just big thinkers and being inspired by what they were saying and saying, wow, we can try to reach for that. And Luke and I participated in a hackathon at UVA this year. We were way outside of our comfort zone. We had never done a hackathon, and we almost won. And we just we literally spent the whole day, I think it's a 24-hour challenge. I understand why people don't do hackathons very often, because
you slept for maybe 2 of them.
Yeah. And we spent probably 8 or 10 hours of the day just talking to as many people as possible, literally walking around campus and telling people our idea. And then it actually felt like a piece of, I've never been like someone who draws, but we still have it up on the wall, this elaborate handwritten flowchart of this system, which, long story short, is to help beat the problem of large language models being sycophantic and reaffirming everything you say. And it was really cool, but the AI was able to write all the code and the logic based on this incredibly complicated flowchart that was the byproduct of these human interactions. I think that experience was a push forward, yeah. And like that. After that, I was like, wow, okay, the upper bound just keeps growing, which is interesting.
I want to ask you 2 more questions before we open it up. Both of you referenced a step change this winter. What happened? What was that step change?
I'd say between when it came out 2-3 years ago and then this winter.
And you're referring to ChatGPT?
I was mainly using ChatGPT.
Yep.
Now I use a lot of Claude and ChatGPT. Zave is the real ChatGPT maestro.
Codex. I think they're coding models.
Yeah, Codex. But that's it. So the step change was the shift between moving from chat. So you would use chat, it would remember, but they had some implementation where you could remember things across chats. But it was the first time you could speak into Claude Code. When Claude Code got really good, you could say in natural language, I want to map where people move in real time. And it was able to convert that into code and an actual outcome.
Yeah, it was like the combination of Claude Code had been on the market, but Claude Code as a product had gotten just breakthrough level of good, along with just frontier large language model research with Opus 4.5 or 4, I think it was, at a perfect storm. Everyone went home during winter break, including all these gifted and talented developers and big thinkers who, of course, were busy. And folks like Andrej Karpathy, if anyone's familiar, and some other leaders in the space went home for winter break and built some pieces of software in spans of days that the world had never seen. And like all the loudest voices in the space were like, this is not the same, this is different. This code is real good code. And people were making things that were just, it was like when OpenClaw came out and Claude Code, and then it was, there was like the whole Moltbook thing, and there was all these bits of pieces. And some of the big voices in the space were sharing, and more folks were trying it. And from there, it was clear that we would never go back to creating software in the same way that we previously had. And now it's pretty fascinating. Like, I actually have not met a software engineer that writes code by hand anymore, at least in my network. At Bonaventure, we work with their CTO, who's 30 years of experience. And I don't think he ever is going to write a line of code again. But it leverages up like your domain expertise, which I think sometimes people tell me like, oh, I feel behind, and we're like, no, like you are the one best suited to create whatever it is that you are best at. And there's studies about this. Anthropic just released a study that the people who actually get the most success with Claude Code and AI in general are typically experienced people, managers and folks who know their domain very well, because they can orchestrate and discern, which is, I think, the valuable skill.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you tell people, about your product and the work that you're doing and your 2 college students, and I'm talking about investors, the executives that you're working with at Bonaventure, executives who want you to come in and help them rework their AI and their context models, what are people's reaction?
I anticipated that we were going to get asked a lot of questions of, well, you guys are young, you don't have a formal background in doing this. We have not really experienced that. It's more questions about, well, why and how, and just more conversational, I would say, and folks that I think, especially, I guess, on the side to tackle one part of the question, when we're speaking with potential clients or investors, that whole space in the venture capital market right now, I mean, the capital flowing into AI companies is just ridiculous. So it's actually like the floor for where we can, like, if you're not using, if AI is not like, at least we're in our domain, if AI is not like an integral part of your business and business strategy, then you're maybe not even having the conversation. Instead, the conversations are like, how are you going to price this? Like creatively, how are you going to increase time to value? What is your go-to-market strategy? Like, you need to be speaking with all your users all the time. If there's 1,000 more apps, why are they going to pick your app? And what is your, like, there's just different questions. It's, if the AI models are going to keep progressing, are you building a platform or system or tool that's going to be a net beneficiary of that, or are you going to get plowed over? So it's unique levels of thinking. That's been my experience, at least.
Yeah, I think you're right. And no one's asked, like, what's your GPA, or like what's your class load?
Yeah, that's actually, yeah.
Yeah, so
good thing they don't ask me that.
Good
So do you guys agree with the thesis that the disruptions of technologies that wave through human history, and this major disruption of AI taking over our personal and professional lives, is expanding us in ways that we can't yet comprehend?
One concept we've studied quite a bit that we keep coming back to is an economic paradox called Jevons Paradox. If anyone's familiar, Jevon, I'd recommend reading about it a bit. It has happened time and time again in history. I'm not sure if it will be the exact same this time, but it is the paradox that when the cost of an incredibly valuable resource or asset comes down, the adoption and use case spreads dramatically over time. And we've seen this with things like, we used to build cities very far and wide, like Florence and these classic European cities, because we didn't have steel. But then we started building cities like Tokyo, and we had jobs that we could never even imagine. We saw the same thing when, like with travel, when we laid train tracks all across the US because it was more available. People didn't travel less, they traveled more to new cities that didn't even have markets of any sort. And so that has happened time and time again, like with many different examples. If history tells us anything, and I agree with this, is that let's just say the cost of code and writing software is plummeting rapidly. And we're seeing this, way more people are writing software, which means the hottest job in the world right now is a forward deployed engineer who can work with the domain experts to bring their prototype that's really good into production. Meanwhile, you have folks who are saying, like, it's going to wipe out all your jobs. I think that's totally a false narrative. So I tend to be optimistic, and I'd say yes. Will things change? No doubt about it. Will it happen at a pace we haven't seen before? No doubt about it. One thing that does concern me, that is going to be the forefront of conversations going forward, is if a small cohort of companies are achieving revenue run rates in the tens and tens of billions we've never seen before, and holding access to the most powerful technology ever created. In the near term, that does require potentially a change in how things can be structured. And you've already seen now, like, there was the model Fable 5 that got released, and it got immediately revoked. And it's actually a really big deal because already, it's only been 2 or 3 years since AI has become mainstream. It's been researched for a long time. Already we've seen a government had to step in because there's an AI model so both potentially powerful for good and for not, that it's been regulated. And that begs the question, this is just the beginning. We're just in day 0, and I'm excited about it. And it's just a conversation that I think needs to become more forefront, which starts with everyone understanding and using the technology to have these really important conversations. So that was a little long-winded, but
That's great.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head. I think I would extend the Jevons Paradox analogy to, like, we commoditized or made steel much more accessible. What does it actually mean when you commoditize intelligence? Like, what is your definition for intelligence? Is it the ability to solve problems? How do we make sure that humans can continue to gain those problem-solving skills? But on the other side, now we have the ability to have any goal and allow this intelligence to solve the problems with us, which is, I think, very, very exciting.
very exciting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions? Danielle?
I want to circle back to both of you mentioning the why and the North Star. Do you hold them accountable to hold space for your North Star? I guess the philosophical underlying conversation has been opened by the two of you. Can you share with us your interaction and just expound on that question?
I think we wouldn't necessarily invite them into defining, like, what the North Star is. That's what we've defined. I think it's uber important that you do bring them into it when they take actions within your entity. For us, it's a startup. But yes, you should absolutely involve your agents like you would a person into aligning with the goals of your organization. So I think that's where they fit in the most in that regard.
So our North Star for the organization is more business focused, you could say. It's not like maximize revenue, it's to provide real-time intelligence to allow knowledge workers across the world to act with greater human agency and make better decisions. Just like, where do you draw the line between, like, especially as AI becomes more and more personal? I think that's a trend that we're going to see play out over the next 5 or 10 years. Where do you, and if and where do you draw a line? I think that ultimately comes down to, like, your level of comfort per se, and, like, what your goals and North Star are, and how much AI is really implemented within our day-to-days. But it's a really good question, I think.
Yeah, hi. So my name's Naveen. I'm a rising, just a little bit of background. I'm rising junior at Tulane University, finance And I'm here with my partner Vasilios. We're both interns at the Bridges Initiative, which is an up-and-coming consulting company for pharmaceutical companies. And there's two main things that we're doing. One is we're handling all the financials, the cost analysis, target revenue projections for the company, as well as developing an AI textbook/database to help clear uncertainty for investors, specifically regulatory uncertainty. And I guess the main question that I have for both of you guys is, we both have, different projects in different areas that we're both working in simultaneously with AI. And since we're kind of similar in the aspect that we're both working together, like you two are with your startup and your ventures, how do you guys essentially, I assume you guys have your own respective projects as well. How do you guys bounce ideas off of each other and like really communicate? It's kind of like a really general question, but we found that we kind of have sometimes, not trouble, but we can definitely improve our effectiveness in like communicating and each other's ideas.
I can start. Yeah, I'd say one is between yourselves, make sure you're uber aligned on like what you're doing. Even like when Zave and I work at Bonaventure, the first thing we do is computers aren't open, we'll get our notebooks out and align like what are we doing in the next 2 hours. You can parallelize your, I know it's jargon, but like work streams there, and then have like very frequent and like intentional touch points with each other about like what you're actually working on. That's something that like Zave and I are very intentional about, is to make sure that like we are both know exactly what's going on, which is like, it's taxing, but it's necessary in that regard. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, 100%. One thing we'll do often, which this is not a plan to the question, but we wanted to try something cool in the spirit of creative and human connection, is we'll record our conversations without looking at any tech, and then ask the AI to like combine ideas that shouldn't be created, like combined typically, and like push our thinking. And so today, we have been recording, I put together like a little piece of software before this that has been recording the live, all the different speakers and some live insights from the meeting. And then I had it, well, it might take a second, but when I finish answering, it, let's see if it will, this might take a second, but I'm having it pull like the insights and the things we talked about. I told it to just mimic the brand of what we were going for today and see if it could like surface some different creative ideas. And this is kind of meant to show like, when you have a creative idea, like just the way I built this was literally by doing a 10-minute voice dump with Luke. And I had never wired up like this type of software before, and it's definitely not perfect, but we can see, like, so here are all the questions that were asked. It did pretty good. What we actually said, so it pulled like different quotes. This was a good one by Luke, Onboarding AI. Luke read like Descartes when he was like 4 years old, I think. So that was his bedtime story. But and then this, so I mean, this is probably still loading more, but like, I was like, let's see if we can think of some creative ideas, or everything from this room, the amalgamation of everything we talked about. Like, let's just say like Jevons Paradox and commoditized intelligence. Like, so if cheaper steel filled cities with jobs no one anticipated, then cheaper intelligence may spawn entirely new categories of human judgment that might not even have names yet. For example, one thing that makes me think of is like, some of the big labs are hiring for like money you wouldn't even believe, storytellers, because they need help. There's so many products, you have to tell the story of the product, and you need live events. Like, it is pretty inspiring, and this is obviously not, this is kind of cool just to show you like how we use AI, like the power of like everyone's too focused on, I think, on text and typing. Like, think multimodal, think drawing, think human language, and think about AI as like a amplification of that. So we had agents extracting from the transcript, creating quotes, synthesizing, writing different things. And we think that like people talk about AGI and artificial super general intelligence. Well, I think it's here. I think that if you, Luke and I debate about this all the time. If you can set up environments and create things, like everyone I think already has, every person already is like a general super intelligence. So if you can use and amplify AI to be the best version of yourself, then I think that is one way to define it. And so this was kind of a fun experiment we did, and I know we're over, so thank you guys all so much for entertaining.